Hey everyone, today we're stepping into a world that's a little grittier than usual, a time of plagues. Forget what the movies told you about noble knights and majestic castles. The real Middle Ages. Brutal, filthy, and hilariously uncomfortable. Honest, before we jump into this medieval mess, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy these deep dives into the strange and sleepless past. And hey, drop a comment to let me know what time it is where you are right now. It's always fascinating to see how far this history rabbit hole travels. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that cozy hum, and settle in. Welcome to the year 1325. The good news, you're alive. The bad news, you wake up on a straw mattress that smells like the inside of a barn, mostly because it was a barn floor not long ago. Your blanket is a wool monk say distant church. Bell clangs, the medieval version of an alarm clock, but louder and with less mercy. You live in a single room, wooden hut with no windows, no privacy, and plenty of bugs, all of them thriving. The smell, a curious cocktail of old beer, goat sweat, and something you really hope ISN you stretch. Bad move. Your joints snap, crackle, and pop like firewood. You're 22, which in medieval terms is basically elderly, and the floor beneath you, either damp from last night's leak, or crusty from something the chickens left behind, and you're not alone. Your entire family is packed in beside you like salted fish, along with livestock and congratulations. You've just started your medieval day, and yes, it gets worse. First stop. Nature's call, except there's no toilet, not even a corner, just a wooden bucket that's already full. Thanks, Uncle Wolf Stan. And once you've done your business, what do? Toss it into the street? That's right. Straight out the window. Ideally, you shout guard is low. Watch out. First, but let's be honest, no one listens. The streets are basically rivers of waste. Public toilets exist, but they're a shared nightmare, shoulder to shoulder, no privacy, and smells that could end a friendship. Toilet paper, try moss, straw, or nothing at all. Feeling hungry? Too bad. Breakfast is a bowl of lukewarm pottage, a thick, lumpy stew that's been simmering for days with whatever you can find. Turnips, grains, maybe a mystery root. You pair it with rock-hard bread that doubles as a medieval weapon. And for drinks, beer, yes, even in the morning, because water will kill you faster. Once fed, you pull on your one outfit, a scratchy wool tunic you've worn for months. No socks, maybe no shoes, and definitely no deodorant. Everyone has fleas, everyone itches, and hygiene is a luxury no one can afford. Welcome to the real Middle Ages, where surviving the morning is already a miracle. Asterisk. You've somehow managed to choke down your morning pottage and beer. Congrats. Now it's time to work. And I use the word work loosely, because it's more like a never-ending punishment from the gods of manual labor. If you're a peasant, and let's be honest, statistically you are, your day revolves around one thing: survival. There's no career ladder, no sick days, no ergonomic chairs, just fields. Fields full of mud, rocks, and the constant threat of breaking your spine while digging turnips with a bent stick. The sun is barely up, but your lord expects his taxes in wheat, barley, or blood, sometimes all three. So you grab your tools, handmade, heavy, and about as comfortable as wrestling a wheelbarrow made of swords, and head out. Farming in the 14th century isn't like today's picturesque Instagram homesteads. There are no tractors, no crop rotations, and no YouTube tutorials. Just you, the land, and a deeply personal relationship with back pain. The weather? It's either too dry, too wet, or just right. For locusts, your boots, if you have any, are soaked within minutes. Your hands are blistered before noon. And if you think you'll get a break to eat, think again. Lunch is last. Breakfast. Again. Same pot, same pottage, possibly the same rat floating on top. If you're lucky, someone found an onion this morning. Bon appétit by midday, you're sunburnt, sore, and have had at least one existential crisis. You pass the time by listening to your neighbors complain about how they think the miller is stealing grain again. He probably is. Everyone is. Corruption is a medieval tradition. And just when you think your body can't take any more, the bell rings again. Church time. And yes, you're expected to show up, dirty tunic and all. The church isn't just a place for prayer. It's the only break you'll get, socially speaking. A chance to hear the local gossip in the form of Latin chants. You don't understand a word the priest says, but you nod along, just in case God is watching. After a few amens and a half-hearted confession about coveting your neighbor's donkey, you head back to the fields, because those turnips aren't going to dig themselves, eventually. As the sun dips below the smoke-stained horizon, you drag yourself home. Home, by the way, is still a single room filled with itchy relatives and animals. The smell has not improved. Neither has your mood. No surprise. It's pottage again. The same pot. Still bubbling. Still mysterious. The circle of life continues. If you're lucky. Someone plays a tune on a badly tuned lute, or tells a mildly terrifying story about a witch who lives in the woods and turns sinners into frogs. Your younger sibling cries. Your father snores. A chicken poops on your only blanket. Just another Tuesday. Asterisk, the sun has set, or rather, the sky is now just a darker shade of gray. There's no electricity, of course. No cozy bedside lamp, no Netflix, no doom scrolling under the blanket. When darkness comes in medieval Europe, it really comes. Your home is lit by a single tallow candle, which smells faintly of wet dog and burning. Regret? Or maybe it's a smoky hearth that fills the room with enough fumes to make you question your life choices. Either way, you can't see much, but that's fine. You're not supposed to. This is bedtime, but don't imagine a peaceful descent into slumber. Oh no. This isn't sleep as you know it. This is medieval sleep, raw, itchy, communal, and occasionally interrupted by demonic dreams or a neighbor having an exorcism. First, let's talk about the bed. If you even have a bed. Most people sleep on straw-stuffed sacks laid on the ground. The straw is old, half-rotten, and so full of insects that it feels like you're sleeping on a living salad. Blankets, one heavy wool cloth, scratchier than a dried thistle bush, and soaked in centuries of sweat. Pillow, maybe a log, maybe nothing. Your neck. Not okay. Now the fun part. You're not alone. Oh no. Medieval sleep is a team sport. You're sleeping in the same room with your parents, siblings, grandparents, and probably a goat named Matilda. Personal space. Never heard of her. You fall asleep to a symphony of snoring, farting, and someone muttering in their sleep about turnips. And just when you finally drift off into a shallow, exhausted haze, you wake up. Because plot twist, people didn't sleep all the way through the night. Back then, in the Middle Ages, the typical night's rest was divided into two chunks, called the first sleep and the second sleep. In between, a weird little hour or two of wakefulness. No one is entirely sure why, but people back then thought it was normal. So you wake up sometime after midnight, maybe you pray, maybe you tend the fire, maybe you whisper secrets to your bedmate who may or may not be your cousin. Medieval relationships are complex. Maybe you just stare into the dark and listen to the wolves howling in the distance. After a while, you drift off again, into your second sleep. If you're lucky, it's uninterrupted. If not, maybe a flea bite wakes you up, or a rat scurrying across your chest, or the neighbor shouting because his thatched roof just caught fire again. Either way, morning will come, brutally, loudly, with a church bell that sounds like someone dropped a cow onto an iron pan. After scratching yourself into a respectable state of wakefulness, you stumble outside into the gray dawn. The sun, if you can even call it that, is a reluctant smudge behind the clouds, as if it too regrets having to shine upon this particular corner of the world. You trudge toward your day's labor, but not before stepping directly into a puddle of something suspiciously warm. Was it rain? A leaky chamber pot? Divine punishment? Who knows? Your body is tired. Not didn't sleep well last night tired, but I've been exhausted since I turned 10 tired. Because in the Middle Ages, sleep isn't restorative, it's survival. It's snatched in bits and pieces, interrupted by cold, rats, and the guy next to you having a full-blown dream. Fight with the devil. You sleep when you can. On hay, on benches, on the church floor during a sermon, a medieval favorite. Actually, no judgment. Everyone did it. The priests just droned louder, and forget the 8-hour block. That's a modern fantasy. In the Middle Ages, sleep came in segments. You'd drift off after nightfall, maybe 2 hours, if you were lucky then. Wake in the middle of the night, wide awake. And not because of anxiety or your phone buzzing. This was first sleep, a built-in pause. People used it for prayer, checking the livestock, casual burglary, or making more peasants. Then they'd go back to bed for second sleep. It was like the world's most depressing Netflix binge. 2 short, restless episodes of unconsciousness. Children, they were treated like miniature adults with worse hygiene. No cribs, no lullabies. They slept wherever there was space. Sometimes asterisk sleep in the medieval world was less of a peaceful escape and more of a reluctant truce between exhaustion and infestation. You didn't go to sleep, you surrendered to it. The moment the sun slipped beyond the horizon, the world outside became a swirling, unknowable shadow. Night was dangerous. Robbers, wolves, demons real, and imagine stalked the dark. So the village locked its doors, barred its shutters, if it had any, and settled in for a night of uneasy dozing. The bed was never just yours. It was shared, passed around, negotiated. You, your spouse, your children, and possibly 2 other unrelated bodies you've never been properly introduced to. You children slept wherever they could find space, often in piles of hay near the hearth, or in a shared bed with siblings, parents, and perhaps a visiting merchant who couldn't afford the inn. Their sleep was fitful, interrupted by cold drafts, barking dogs, and the occasional scream from the street outside. Sleep training, not a thing. If the baby cried, it cried. If the toddler rolled into the fire pit, that was a lesson learned hopefully, once. But let's talk about one of the strangest aspects of medieval sleep: segmented sleep. People didn't just knock out for 8 straight hours. That's a modern myth, born of light bulbs and Netflix. Back then, you went to bed shortly after sundown, maybe 8 or 9 p. The watch? During the watch, people prayed, read if they were literate and lucky enough to own a candle and a book, had a snack. Afterward came second sleep. A few more hours of rest before dawn dragged your body back into the muck of daily survival. This broken rhythm wasn't seen as insomnia. It was just sleep, medieval-style disjointed, communal, and barely adequate. And yes, dreams mattered. A lot. People believed dreams carried divine messages, omens, or warnings from the bed itself. If you had one was a wooden frame with ropes or planks across it, topped with a straw mattress that, over time, flattened into something resembling a bag of gravel. Wealthier folk added feathers, poorer folk added more straw. If it got lumpy, you didn't replace it. You flipped it, beat it with a stick, and hoped the bugs inside were feeling merciful that night. Pillows were rare. You might rest your head on a bundle of clothes, a hunk of wood, or the soft part of a dead rabbit, if you had one. Woolen blankets were precious and rarely washed. They absorbed your nightmares and bodily odors, fusing into an evolving quilt of medieval misery. And then there were the noises. Night was not quiet. Creaking wood, farting relatives, howling winds, the distant moans of a cow giving birth, or the very near scurrying of rats beneath your feet. All of these sounds became part of the lullaby. If you could manage to fall asleep through it all, you were lucky. If you couldn't, you stared at the ceiling, counted lice bites, and contemplated the vague dread of dying in your sleep without confessing your sins. The upper classes, of course, slept differently. Nobles had bedchambers, canopy beds, feather-stuffed mattresses, even servants to warm the sheets with hot stones before bedtime. But even they couldn't escape the fleas, the stink, or the looming fear of eternal damnation. Sleep was less a sanctuary and more a temporary escape from a world that never stopped scratching at your door. And so the medieval world slumbered unevenly, communally, often reluctantly wrapped in blankets of wool and whispers of superstition, dreaming not of better days, but simply of surviving the next one. The first sleep you collapse into your scratchy bedding at sundown, exhausted from a day of plowing fields or scrubbing chamber pots. First sleep drapes over you like a soggy cloak. Not restful, exactly, but necessary. You might sleep a few hours before waking with a jolt, sometime around midnight. You're not alone. Across villages, towns, and castles, thousands of people, sneak out. There's a reason this midnight window became known as the Watch. For a brief hour or two, the world teeters on the edge of sleep and waking. You might get up and stoke the hearth, check on the animals. Some even used the time to write, read scripture, or commit lesser sins in the shadows. It's not uncommon to find lovers slipping from hut to hut, or gossiping in hushed tones by firelight, but not you. You're too tired to gossip. Yotha second sleep. This stretch is usually dream heavy. Your body sinks into deeper rest, and your mind, already riddled with superstition and fasting-induced hallucinations, goes on wild medieval adventures. Dreams are not considered trivial. In the medieval world, they might be signs from God, warnings from beyond, or symptoms of demonic influence. You once dreamed of a one-eyed goose holding a chalice? The village priest interpreted it as a warning. The next day your neighbor fell into a pigsty and broke his leg. You've been paranoid ever since. Second sleep ends just before dawn. Not because you're well rested, no, because the rooster has opinions and insists you hear them. And just like that, another day begins. And there's more. The upper classes, if they weren't dying of gout or dysentery, treated sleep as a delicate ritual. Silk sheets, if you're lucky, or alive in France. Incense burned to banish the foul miasma of night spirits, and embroidered pillows stuffed with swan down, or so the stories go. Nobles feared nighttime demons, known as incubi or mare, that could sit on your chest and smother you in your sleep. If you ever woke feeling heavy, like a donkey was perched on your lungs, congratulations, you've just had a supernatural sleep attack. Peasants didn't bother with demons. They were too busy worrying about rats chewing their toes. And then, of course, there are the children. Infants often slept swaddled like burritos, stiff and silent. It was believed they needed to be tightly wrapped to grow straight and righteous. Unfortunately, this also made it easier for them to roll into fires, fall off beds, or be smothered by a parent's elbow. Cribs were rare. Most babies slept in the family bed, and sometimes didn't wake up. Older children were treated like miniature adults. No special bedtimes, no lullabies unless you count drunken tavern songs. They were expected to sleep when the adults slept or didn't. Some slept in the loft, if you had one, others on the floor. If your family was especially large and poor, you shared a blanket with siblings, or cousins, or that one kid who just sort of moved in and never left. You try to sleep again, but sleep in medieval times is never just sleep. It's not the warm embrace of a memory foam mattress or the gentle hum of fewer. Not alone in this midnight madness. Everyone around you is obsessed with guarding their slumber. Your neighbor Beatrix swears she saw a night hag, an old crone who sits on your chest and drinks your breath. Her husband claims he woke up paralyzed, unable to scream as shadowy figures loomed in the rafters. The village elder said it was a Mara, a cursed spirit that rides men in their sleep. No one questioned it. How could you? It made too much sense, so you sleep in shifts. 2 sleeps, as they call it. First sleep begins after dusk. You lie curled beside your snoring uncle, whose breath smells like spoiled onions and ancestral regrets, and drift into that fragile, dangerous void. Around midnight, you're jolted awake. Maybe by a rat chewing your hair, maybe by the cold, maybe by the distant cry of something human, or perhaps not quite. It's the waking hour, the watch hour when dreams spill over into waking life. You rise, heart pounding, and pray that the shadows on the wall are just shadows. And now comes the in-between. That strange, sacred space between first and second sleep. Some say it's when witches gather on windswept moors, sky-clad and whispering curses into clay dolls. Others say it's the hour when the souls of the dead wander freely, sniffing for warm bodies to inhabit. You dare not step outside. You've heard the stories. A man left his home during the in-between hour and returned days later, barefoot and babbling about a procession of the damned, torch-bearing skeletons, and the ghost of his grandmother riding a goose. He never spoke again, well, not in words anyone could understand. So instead you stay near the hearth. You whisper prayers, maybe stir the embers, maybe steal a quiet moment with your wife or husband. That's the only time privacy can be stolen in the endless crush of communal life. Then, when the air feels safe again, you slip back into second sleep. If you're lucky, you'll awaken with only the usual aches and nightmares. If not, well, some people don't wake up at all, and that's just the peasant's tale. Highborn folk have their own sleep demons. Take Lady Isadora, rumored to sleep beneath a silver crucifix and 7 holy relics stitched into her pillow. Why? Because of the dream curse. She dreamed once of a raven pecking out her eyes, and when she awoke, she couldn't see for 3 days. Coincidence? The nuns think not. Since then, she's refused to sleep unless a priest chants Psalm 91 outside her chamber door. Others turn to folk magic. In the next village over, there's an old man who sells dream catchers made from hedgehog spines and owl bones. He claims they trap dark thoughts. He's missing 3 fingers and half an ear. No one asks why. They just pay in eggs or candle stubs and nod respectfully. Because in a world where sleep might kill you or worse, open your soul to things unholy. No precaution is too strange, asterisk. The night had teethed out in the thatched roof village of where even the stars seemed hesitant to shine. People feared the hours after the church bell tolled midnight. This was not the sacred silence of peaceful slumber. This was the time the air grew heavy, when dreams soured into omens, and sleep became a battleground for the soul. Sleep, in Eld Hollow, was not taken lightly. It was not merely a rest, but a sacred act wrapped in layers of ritual and dread. A mother would not simply tuck in her child. No, she'd trace 3 crosses above the bed with a sprig of juniper, whispering rhymes in a language older than the Bible. A bowl of salt sat by the door. A knife, iron and chipped, lay under the straw mattress, not for protection from man, but from things that walked through walls. They called them the Natvanders, Nightwalkers. Old women would mutter their names behind their hands. Shadows, with human faces, folk who didn't sleep in the grave like they were meant to. According to the village priest, they were just tales for children. But even he barred his doors after sundown and painted white chalk circles around his bed. No one trusted sleep entirely. It was during the deepest part of it, during the first sleep, that souls were thought to be most vulnerable. People believed that the soul could wander, leave the body, float above rooftops, and drift through the hedgerows. And if something evil came looking, it could slip in instead. That's why so many villagers woke, gasping, sweating, eyes wide, but unable to move. They called it the hag, a sure sign you'd been visited in the dark. Old Matilda claimed it had happened to her just last week. Her voice shook when she told the others at the well, said she woke to find a pale figure squatting on her chest, its eyes black as pitch, its mouth open but silent. She couldn't scream, couldn't move. When she finally did, her arms were covered in bruises like claw marks. She came for my breath, Matilda hissed, and next time, she won't leave without it. No one laughed. They all knew about the breath stealer, a legend that stretched back to the days of the plague, said to be a woman who died unshriven, buried in swampy ground, denied Christian rites. Now she wandered from house to house, suffocating the living and feeding on the warm fog of their breath. Children were taught to sleep with a wooden cross under their tongues. Lovers never embraced after sundown, for fear their tangled souls would be too vulnerable, and no one dared whistle after dark. But it wasn't just spirits and demons that haunted medieval sleep, it was the body itself. Waking in the middle of the night wasn't abnormal, it was expected. The first sleep, people called it, would last until midnight. Then there was a waking hour, or two, a twilight state of reflection, prayer, or sin. People talked to their neighbors, pondered dreams, confessed to their spouses, or crept silently out to meet someone under the hedges. Then came second sleep. Deeper, stranger, more dangerous, because second sleep belonged to the witches. At least that's what the villagers believed. Anyone found wandering between the hours of second sleep was suspect. Milkmaids accused of drying cows with a glance. Crippled men blamed for storms. The baker's daughter, silent and pale, who never quite blinked right. And so, the line between sleep and death was always thin. Every morning a miracle, every yawn a risk. Superstition wasn't just a cultural quirk, it was armor. Yet, despite all the fear, there was something beautiful in it too. Sleep in the Middle Ages wasn't a lonely act. Families slept together, limbs tangled, body heat shared under wool and hay. Children fell asleep to whispered prayers. Lovers murmured secrets during the midnight waking. Old widows, alone in there. Cots clutched relics and spoke aloud to long-dead husbands. Voices drifting into the straw-scented dark. They feared sleep, yes, but they also understood it. They respected it, for in sleep they saw the world beyond heaven, hell, and the endless, gray in between, a nightly pilgrimage into the unknown, and they never quite knew what would come back with them. To the south of Eld Hollow, past the fenlands, where the ground burped with peat gas, and the trees grew bent like old men, there lay the village of Hollowmere. The villagers there were a different breed, quiet, pale, suspicious of strangers, and known across the Shire for one singular, unnerving thing. They remembered their dreams. Not just fragments, not just feelings, they remembered. In alarming detail, names, dates, faces of the dead. Even conversations they had never lived but could repeat word for word. It was said a boy once awoke screaming, naming a man no one in the village knew, only to have that same man appear 3 days later muddy-booted and asking for shelter. And in the center of Hollowmere, in a hut crusted with herbs and soot, lived the dream-catcher. Her name was Mirwin, and she was old in a way that defied counting. Some swore she'd been there when the first stones of the church were laid. Others whispered she'd outlived 3 generations and made a pact to keep going. No one knew what she ate. No one knew when she slept. But they all knew that if your dreams turned rotten, she was the one who could cut out the rot. People came from as far as Bridgemore to see her, clutching fragments of nightmares like confession slips. In exchange for a coin, a comb of hair, or sometimes just silence, Mirwin would reach into her bag of bones and string, pluck out a charm, and whisper the dream's true name. Because all dreams had names, and names had power. One autumn, when the moon hung low and red like a scab, a girl from Eld Hollow came knocking on Mirwin's door. Her name was Anselma, daughter of the cooper, known for her sharp tongue and sharper mind, but now she was quiet. Shadows bruised her eyes. She hadn't slept in 4 nights. I keep seeing my brother, she said. He died in the spring, but every night he's there, standing by the hearth, just watching me. Mirwin didn't flinch. She reached for her wooden bowl and filled it with damp ashes and dried lavender. Does he speak? Anselma nodded, lips trembling. He says, "You buried me wrong." The dream catcher stirred the ashes with a bone spoon. A tiny face of child surfaced in the black dust and grinned before crumbling away. "You didn't close his eyes, Mirwin," said Anselma, paled. "What? You left them open? That lets the soul wander. He's lost. Cold, trying to come home through you." The girl wept. "What do I do?" Mirwin handed her a talisman of stone wrapped in iron thread and dried nettle leaves. "Place this under your tongue. Tonight, sleep by the hearth. If he comes, do not move. Do not speak. Let the smoke blind him. If he leaves, his soul will find rest. If he doesn't." Anselma never finished that night. They found her in the morning, curled on the floor, her mouth filled with ash, a smile frozen on her face. Her eyes were open wide and glassy, and her brother was never seen again. The sleep trials of St. Felwyn, but it was not only peasants who feared the dark. Even monasteries, those solemn bastions of Latin chants and stone corridors, held their own dread for dreams. In the Abbey of St. Felwyn, the monks practiced the vigil of sleep, a ritual where they forced themselves to stay awake for 3 days. Believing that sleep opened the door to temptation, demonic visitations, they claimed, crept in during the 2nd hour of sleep, whispering scenes and stirring carnal visions. Brother Elric, a devout young monk, was the abbey's rising star, fluent in scripture, chaste in heart, and unwavering in discipline until the dreams began. At first it was music, a melody he couldn't place, soft and sorrowful, playing beneath the stone tiles of the chapel. Then came the woman. She stood in the doorway of his cell, veiled, wearing a crown of willow branches. She never moved, never spoke, just watched. Every night she came closer. Elric confessed. The abbot assigned him penance gold baths, longer prayers, lashings on the soles of his feet. Still, she came. Then one night, Elric screamed. The monks broke into his cell to find him sobbing, clutching a bundle of bones and straw he claimed was the woman's child. He had no memory of finding it, nor could anyone explain how it got there. They walled up his cell. And in the silence of the abbey, monks began reporting the same dream. A soft melody, a woman in the doorway, a cradle, rocking. Whispers. In the thatch. By the time night descends again over the moors of Bretwick, the wind has returned. It seeps through the thatched roof like a creeping thing, cold and wet with mist. The entire village, if it can be called that, prepares for what they call the waking hour, a time just after midnight when sleep breaks, and the world feels different. Inside the dim cottage, the fire has burned to red coals, and the family of Edric the miller lies sprawled beneath a massive wool sheet they all share. The children, grubby, pale-faced things named Wolf, Maud, and Elric fidget. In their half-sleep, their small bodies pressed against their mothers for warmth. Edric stares at the rafters, unmoving. This first sleep, the dead sleep, usually lasts from sunset until midnight. It is believed to be the most restful, the sleep God intended. But what comes next is far stranger. because after the dead sleep comes the second waking, and with it, the other things. The second waking, the church bell strikes the halfway mark to dawn, and the entire household rouses not from restlessness, but out of habit. This waking is as regular as the tides. No one speaks much, but Maud begins to spin flax in the firelight, and Edric murmurs Latin prayers he barely understands. It is a liminal time, neither night nor morning, and the air feels thinner. The second waking is when one does their deepest thinking, according to village lore, or their darkest. Some say it's the time when the veil between the living and dead is thinnest. Others claim it's when the sin-stained soul is most vulnerable. This is when women pray against dreams of the dead, and children are warned never to look into corners, for fear of seeing the night crone, a wretched spirit set to squat silently in darkness, staring. Those who wake and wander at this hour risk more than just their souls. They risk meeting things older than God. The night crone and the sleep terrors, the children of Bretwick, are warned not to sleep alone. Not because of wolves or robbers, but because of her. The villagers call her many things. The pressing hag, the black sleeper, she who waits. But all tales agree, she comes when you're most vulnerable, lying on your back, eyes wide open, frozen, unable to scream. Sleep paralysis is not a word they know, but its dread lives among them like a second plague. She sits on your chest, whispered old Sibba, the herb-wife, to Maud one night, and drinks the warmth from your breath. If you see her eyes, you'll never sleep again. Children sleep in clusters. Adults lie on their sides or stomachs, avoiding any posture that might summon her. And when someone dies in their sleep, they say, the crone came. But sometimes, they do not die. Sometimes they just ... change. As dusk fell upon the village of Eld Hollow, the twilight shadows deepened like ink spilled across the earth. Smoke curled from crooked chimneys, twisting in the fading light like a signal to unseen watchers in the woods. Supper was over. The pottage, pot hung, empty and steaming. Bread crusts had been gnawed clean by mice before they even hit the floor. It was time for the night to begin in Eld Hollow. Night did not come quietly. In the stillness, children were tucked not into beds but into bundles of hay near the hearth, their bodies wrapped in old cloth and dried wool. Mothers muttered charms under their breath as they covered their young ones. East charms older than the church, whispered from mother to daughter in the dead of winter. Sleep tight, don't blink thrice, they warned, for blinking thrice, before sleep was said to let in the second breath, a phantom draft that crept through the soul's gate and made room for demons. Most feared of all was the first wake. The time just after midnight when the body stirred naturally, the soul briefly returning to earth. This was a dangerous hour. If a child woke and spoke aloud during the first wake, it was believed the devil might hear their voice, memorize it, and call them by name before dawn. And so, the village slept in 2 shifts. The first sleep, deep and still. Then the first wake, filled with whispered prayers, night pissings, and secret rites. And then, if fortune allowed, the second sleep, long and dream-heavy, but watched closely by candlelight in case a changeling stirred in the cradle. It was on one such night wind, howling through the trees like the cry of a hungry god, that a boy named Unsel awoke not to the sounds of his family, but to a tapping at the wooden wall near the roof beams. A single tap, then another, then silence. He was 7 winters old. His eyes were wide in the dark. He reached for the family dog, but it had bolted to the far corner of the room, ears flattened, growling low. The tapping came again, and then a whisper. Not in any language he knew, but in the slow cadence of something that had once been words, mangled by centuries and thirst. Unsel didn't scream. He knew better. Screaming might answer the call. Instead, he pulled the heavy blanket of bramble cloth over his head and repeated the rhyme he had heard from old Nan down by the drying shed. Worm of moon and bat of sin, take not my breath, don't scratch my skin. Bones stay still and heart beats slow. I sleep in peace. Let me not go. When he woke, the hut was cold. His mother was pale and silent, clutching a bit of iron in one hand and a clump of feathers in the other. The roof had fresh claw marks, long and deliberate, as if something had climbed down instead of up. That was only the beginning. Strange. Sleep came upon Eld Hollow in the weeks that followed. Men began to dream of drowning in dry fields. Women spoke in sleep with voices that weren't their own. The priest dreamed of fire and woke to find ash in his mouth. Children were found sleepwalking to the edge of the woods. When asked what they had seen, they answered in rhyme, always ending with, the man with the lantern has no face. The village midwife, Mistress Thale, called for a fast. Meat stirs the red dreams, she warned. Eat only root and water, until the sun sleeps less. The sun, indeed, seemed too dim. Days were gray, hours off kilter. Even the roosters crowed at odd times. As though unsure of their place in the order of things, sleep became a battlefield. By the time the second bell of Vespers rang out, you had been awake for what felt like weeks. The day was long and full of aches. You'd spent hours in the fields turning over a patch of cursed earth that hadn't grown anything but nettles since your neighbor's goat died and bled out in it. Some say it was wolves. Others say it was the Kakamara demon that rides your chest while you sleep and steals the breath from your lungs. Either way, nothing grows there but stinging plants and rumors. but now the sun has dipped below the edge of the world. And you are home if you can call a dark hut with a leaky roof and a bed of straw and lice a home. The fire in the hearth is little more than a sulky glow, not even bright enough to warm your fingers. Your family huddles close. Someone sneezes. You hope it's not the plague. Again, then comes the part no one talks about. The part the priests don't bless and the midwives whisper about behind thick curtains. It's not just sleep, it's the first. Sleep. You lie down on your straw pallet in the corner nearest the door, because that's where your father used to sleep before the coughing took him. His shape is still there in the straw, faint but unmistakable, like the memory of warmth on cold stone. You don't speak about it, no one does. The house grows quiet. The only sounds are the crackle of firewood and your cousin Elric's endless snoring. You close your eyes and wait for the black tide of sleep to take you. It does hardly. First sleep crashes over you like a wave. It is thick, suffocating, and dreamless. The kind of sleep that feels like falling into a pit. For 3 hours, the world forgets you, your soul wanders. You are not yourself, not awake, not dead. You are in between, but then, like clockwork, because medieval life has its own unnatural rhythms, you wake. Everyone does. Not for long, just for an hour or two. This is the watching hour, the wake gap, a strange time after the first sleep and before the second, when something stirs in the air. People wake to pray, to stoke the fire, to have sex, because the priest says it's the best time to conceive, or to whisper secrets they wouldn't dare say in daylight. You blink awake, it's darker now than before, somehow blacker than night. The moon has vanished behind thick clouds, and the embers have died. The silence is unnatural, heavy dot. Then you hear it scraping not from inside the hut, from just outside the wall. A claw on wood, slow, deliberate, then ... a breath. You hold your own. Everyone else still sleeps. You know the tales. This is when the night folk walk, not ghosts. Exactly, not demons either. Something else. They come and sleep. They knock once, twice. If you answer on the third, they take your voice, your skin, or worse, your dreams. And once they've eaten your dreams, you never sleep the same again. You close your eyes. Pretend you didn't hear it. Bury your face in the straw and pray to Saint Godaberto, protector of the insane and sleepless, that it moves on. Eventually it does. You hear the rustling of grass, the cracking of frost, a sigh of disappointment. The second sleep comes more gently. Like a blanket you forgot you owned. You slip into it like a second skin. Morning comes, dragging its boots across the cold dirt floor. The rooster crows. Late, as always. You're already up, gathering firewood with your sister while she recounts a dream, or what she thought was a dream. I saw them, she says. The ones that walk backward? You freeze. You're not supposed to talk about them. They had no eyes, she continues. Too young to know better, but they smiled anyway. One put its hand on my chest. It was cold, not like snowlight. The river in winter, deep cold, the kind that sinks inside. You tell her to hush. You spit on the ground 3 times to ward off the attention of things listening. The old woman in the village square says the night folk hate spit, and rosemary and honest work. You've got spit by week's end. Something's changed in the village. More people are waking up during the first watch. They speak of dreams with no faces, of a rhythm in the night like footsteps, but out of sync with their own breathing. Even Father Aldrich, the priest, has grown pale. He cuts his sermons short, speaks more of demons, less of salvation. Then the baker's boy, young Tomas, is found asleep in the middle of the road, just lying there, eyes open, mouth stuffed with dirt. He doesn't wake for 2 days. When he does, he screams about the stairs under the hill and the king that walks on moth legs. No one understands. The villagers decide he was touched by the moon. They blame his mother's weak constitution, or witches. Always witches. Witch burning season starts early that year. You watch from the crowd, your face blank, because it's your cousin they've tied to the stake. Elric, his snores were too loud, his eyes too empty. They say he whispered secrets to the cows in the second watch, and worse, he never woke between sleeps. Not once. People whisper that the night folk liked him, that he let them in. The fire takes him quickly. He doesn't scream. That scares people more than if he had. Autumn slips into winter like a knife. Now everyone wakes between sleeps. The priest starts organizing midnight prayers during the wake hour. Candles are burned, psalms are muttered. Some even stay awake all night, afraid that if they sleep, they'll dream of the hill again. The one with the mouth instead of a door. The animals sleep strangely. Cows that once lay still now sway on their hooves. Chickens sleepwalk. A dog tries to bury itself in the hearth ashes, and the scratching at your wall never stopped. Only now it happens on both sides, inside and out.